right, so what happens after we immediately die? So I'm going to start with several scriptures, beginning with Luke 23, beginning in verse 43. It says, "And Jesus said to him, 'Assuredly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise.'" So he's speaking to, the criminal on the cross next to him. So one rejected him, another, embraced Jesus. And so he's telling him, we're going to be in paradise. And so and he knew that his last breath would be today. He also knew that of the criminal. So let's go to Philippians 1:23. "For I am hard pressed between the two, having a desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better." 2 Corinthians 5:8. "We are confident, yes, well pleased, rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord." So that word, when we start looking and breaking down the word body, this is the temporary vessel. This is not our permanent body, okay? We're going to have another body, permanent body, when at the time of the rapture, and we will receive our resurrected body, just like Jesus. When after his resurrection, it'll be the same type of body. So just keep this in mind, though. Paul, he was talking to the church in Thessalonica, and he was trying to comfort them because, their relatives and so forth, when they died, what happens as believers in Christ, when we die? And so he said this. He said, "But I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope." So I'm saying falling asleep, okay, that just means that they have passed or died. "For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, God will bring him those who sleep in Jesus." 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 14. So falling asleep, that word in the Greek is koimao, which essentially just means to recline, kind of be kicking back and just waiting. This is being in a waiting position. It also refers to our physical bodies at the time of the rapture. We'll talk about that on the Rapture podcast. So when we die, okay, we're gonna talk about death before and after the cross, and will we have a body? Well, we're gonna get to that in a minute. So will our spirits be accompanied into heaven by angels? Have you ever heard that term that that we have a guardian angel, and that when we die we're ushered into to heaven by these angels? Well, is that biblical? Well, yes. In Luke 16, beginning in verse 22, "So it was that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried." We're going to spend a fair amount of time on Luke 16. We're going to go over that entire story here a little later, so if you want to mark that down. So this is a story of Lazarus and the rich man. So Lazarus was a beggar, and notice that he was taken into Abraham's bosom, and we're going to talk about that also. Understand that's Abraham's bosom. When did that change? That's death before and after the cross. And so if there's a couple of other, interesting books that I've read. Now, I've mentioned this from the pulpit. I've talked about it here before. I've not talked about, I don't think, this most recent one. So there's a book by, two different books by John Burke. So he was, I think he was an engineer or something. I can't remember what he was. But he was an atheist, and his dad was dying, and there was a book, the late great Planet Earth, I think, or I think it was Life to Life. I can't remember, but anyway, no. Yeah, I think it was Life After Life. That's what it was. The book was Life After Life, and his dad on his dad's bed there in the hospital, and he read it, and it's talked about near-death experiences. Now, it really sparked his interest. Eventually, I think that's what led him into a relationship with Jesus. But over the years, he's a pastor. He's pastored now for decades. Down in Austin, and he's written two books. And one is called Imagine Heaven, and the other is Imagine the God of Heaven. I've just finished the Imagine the God of Heaven, and in some ways I like it better because he's talking about who God is, the very nature and essence of God. He also still references some of these near-death experiences, these NDEs. So in a number of these NDEs, there are countless examples of when they die. So first, many of them, they're out of their body, and then they can see what's going on. A lot of times if they're in a surgical room or whatever else, there's some interesting stories. I'll share one in a minute. But then it's very common that the next thing that happens is that they are in the presence of angels. two angels, and they usually say there's one that was I thought was kind of an interesting story. It was her guardian angel, and this guardian angel had said that this individual was her 2031st, or was the angel's 2031st person to be a guardian over. I don't know. I know that sounds weird, right? I mean, these is it scriptural? Well, the angels are okay. Some of this stuff, some of these stories, you can't make stuff up. And I'll share why. Like for example, let me give you. There's Mary. She was in an operating room. She died at childbirth, giving birth well, she wasn't in the operating room. Yeah, she was just in the birthing room at the hospital. Something happened in the room, and she died. And so she's coming up. She could see the top of the ceiling fan. She's ushered into the presence of God, angels, the experience, and not only that, everybody talks about how there aren't even words to explain the colors and environment. There is no death, right? Like even if you pluck a flower and you put it back down, it seems like they almost reattach itself. It's just but there's all this. Well, anyway, God says it's not your time, and says your baby boy was just fine. She comes back down, and when she's re-entering her body, on the top of the ceiling fan there was a red sticker. I know, random, right? And so nobody would believe her. When she woke up, she was sharing the story. I mean, obviously, that's what everybody wants to, right? You're in the presence of God. You have this experience, and you want to start just telling everybody about it. Well, she said, okay, and then she remembered the red sticker. She goes, okay, how would I know this then? That there's a red sticker on the top of that ceiling fan. And anyway, they went and looked back in that room, and there was a sticker. There's another scenario where there was a shoe on top of the roof. I mean, it's things like that. And not everybody goes, out of their body quite like that. I mean, sometimes it's immediately into the presence of the angels, ushered directly into heaven. And I'm not going to try to line some of that stuff up. It's just interesting. So some of that take with a grain of salt. But what is important that we encourage our faith and know that the coming place, our coming eternity, heaven, is absolutely beautiful. And it's eternal.